Clearly what you'd want to do if you acquire this technology is you want to study it and you'd want to replicate it. Seems to me, I would say no later than the 60s, but could it be as early as the 50s? Maybe even in the 40s they were making these things that were actually functional. And along these lines, let me just say I do have a bit of a problem with, although I've come to be very sympathetic to the concept of a post-World War II Nazi-based UFO technology. Yes, I think that that's a very important part of this picture. I'm yet not really persuaded, not at all, that that's the full picture. We've got a lot of different groups, I'll get a little more into this, that are involved here, and I don't believe that all of them are us. So I think that some of us acquired things that belong to some of them being non-humans, and that we've been trying to make these things. So making UFOs, and then studying the bodies, conducting biotech research, I think is another important part of this program. Another one, which I'll get into a moment from now, is developing a secret space program. Clearly, you would need to do that. You'd need to have a clandestine program to explore, to whatever extent possible, the region around your world without the public knowing about it. The program's also about theft, basically, about using free money to conduct the research and to provide the security. That is, you know, your tax dollars and mine. It's also about profiting from this. It's a money-making venture from the acquired technology, segueing it into patents and economic financial opportunities. It's also about hiding itself from most of U.S. and Allied military structures, while using them, however, as their security force, their own personal security system. It's a really nifty scenario when you think about it from their point of view. And also, let's never forget, maybe the most important thing, it's about dealing in whatever fashion they can with the presence of these others, these other beings, and their interaction with humanity and with planet Earth in whatever fashion that happens to be. Yes, they have to deal with that too. So now let me move into space, what I'll call oddities. And this really, traditionally, isn't my domain. Really, it's Richard Hoagland's domain. Remember when he used to do Mars research? I remember that, those days. I appreciate the 9/11 research, Richard, very much. It was excellent. In fact, while I'm thinking of it, I would like to just comment that the exposition on Dr. Judy Wood was superb, absolutely superb. And I really appreciated the discussion on torsion physics, something that I'm sure many of us have heard of, but really something that was not as clear to me as it was at the end of that lecture. Now, when I deal with space, I actually feel very constrained because I'm really not the expert here. Richard is the expert. But I don't need to be the expert for what I'm trying to say here. All right? So what I want to do is discuss what I think is very good evidence for the fact that there are things beyond the atmosphere of this planet that are not supposed to be, and that their very existence would demand the creation of a secret space program, if nothing else than to investigate. Okay? So let's look at that. Now this is a video clip. Let me make sure that I've got the sound on. I do. Some of you are very familiar with this. This is only 2 minutes. It's worth our time. This is the testimony of a former U.S. Air Force Sergeant, Carl Wolf, and this is from the, I guess let's call it the legendary Disclosure Conference organized by Dr. Stephen Greer back in May 2001. Heck of an event, I have to say. I wish I were there. I was a brand newbie in the UFO field at that time, following this avidly. And listen to what Carl Wolf says about the moon.
My name is Carl.
Oh, wait.
And I was...
Hold on. Do we have audio for this? We do not? Oh, I'll put it to my mic, yeah. Awesome. Crank it up.
My name is Carl Wolf, and I was a precision electronics photographic repairman with a top secret crypto clearance in the United States Air Force. I was stationed at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. In 1965, in mid-1965, I was loaned to the Lunar Orbiter Project at NASA on Langley Field. Dr. Colley was in charge of that project. They had problems with a piece of electronic equipment that was bottlenecking their production of photographs. I went to the facility, and when I walked into the facility, there were scientists from all over the world. I was stunned, actually, to see people at a NASA project from all over the world. It didn't make any sense to me initially. I was taken into the laboratory where the equipment was malfunctioning. I couldn't repair it in the dark. I asked to have it removed. A Airman Second Class was in the dark room at that time. I was also an Airman Second Class. I was interested in how the whole process functioned, how the data got from the lunar orbiter to the laboratory. Asked the young man if he described the process to me. He did. About 30 minutes into the process, he said to me, in a very distressed way, by the way, we've discovered a base on the backside of the moon. And then he proceeded to put photographs down in front of me, and clearly in these photographs were structures, mushroom-shaped buildings, spherical buildings, and towers. And at that point, I was very concerned because I knew we were working on compartmentalized security. He had breached security, and I was actually frightened at that moment, and I did not question him any further. And a few moments later, someone did come into the room. I worked there for 3 more days, and I remember going home and naively thinking, I can't wait to hear about this on the evening news. And here it is, more than 30 years later, and I hope we hear about it tonight. And I will testify under oath before Congress.
Yeah, pretty neat. Now I've done it. Let's, oh boy. I'm not too good with this. And in fact, I've just blown the microphone off the. Thank you. So sorry. I broke it. I broke it. Did I? It's what I do. There we go. Okay, excellent. Can you hook me up there? I felt like the helpless damsel in distress. Thank you very much. Then we have some other statements. Can you hear me all right here? Is this good? All right, good. Clark McClelland. I've spoken with Clark a number of times also. He had many, many years working at Cape Canaveral and Kennedy Space Center. This is a statement he put on abovetopsecret.com. If you go to ATS, I visit it pretty frequently. He just writes here, I worked at Cape Canaveral and the Kennedy Space Center from 1958 to 1992. There are many mysteries that have been discovered during the years that we have been exploring the moon, sun, and planets. The former CEO of Lockheed Skunk Works was visiting the Cape many years ago. I asked him a question. This is Ben Rich. Ben Rich said, Clark, black budget dollars have taken the USA military at least 50 plus years beyond the present understanding of the general public and how far we are technologically advanced. You have no idea where we have gone out there. I said, Mars, sir? He looked at me and his head movement said yes. Are there monuments on the moon, Mars, etc.? Bet on it. Again, that's a thread from Above Top Secret. You've got the link right there. You can find that, no problem. And then we have the story of Gary McKinnon. In a nutshell, his case is still, it drags on. This has been almost a full decade. And this man's life has been in limbo since he was arrested in November of '02. And essentially, Gary McKinnon was looking for proof of UFOs and of the cover-up. To call him a hacker is really not accurate, but he was peeking to the extent that he could into various U.S. defense websites looking for evidence of the UFO cover-up. And what he found on the U.S. Space Command site around November of 2000, he found a list of what he said were officer names under the heading non-terrestrial officers. He also found a list of what were called fleet-to-fleet transfers, which had a list of ship names. None of those names were correspondent to any U.S. Navy ships. Couldn't remember the names, unfortunately. Then was arrested in 2 years after that, in '02. And To this day, he's in danger of extradition. His fate is not resolved. What's interesting, by the way, as an aside about the McKinnon case, if you study the media coverage, the reportage of his saga, in the early years, the UFO angle was very, very prominently displayed. This guy looking for the UFO cover-up finds XYZ, is arrested, wow. Look up the McKinnon case and track the coverage in subsequent years. And the longer we go into this, the UFO thing, if it even appears anywhere, it's at the bottom, tucked away. And now he's simply called by the Pentagon the greatest Pentagon hacker in history, which is a load of rubbish. Absolute rubbish. But this is, so in other words, the whole UFO angle has been very, very subtly siphoned out of the story, and that's what it's all about. And the fact is, I think Gary McKinnon did find evidence of a secret space program. That's, I think, the single most logical conclusion. Then we have some photographic anomalies. Again, this is Richard Hoagland's territory, not truly mine, but hey, I'm allowed to look at these pictures too. And also, I mean, I would just say I try to, I don't want to just blah, blah you to death here. I've tried to read what people and analysts have to say about it. I'm not a physicist at all. I'm not a true photographic analyst. I know how to look at some pictures a little bit, but that doesn't make me an expert. But this is a very famous photograph. It's called the Shard, and in the background the tower. In fact, Richard's talked about this on Coast, I think, a number of times. All he can say is that this object in the foreground, the Shard, is estimated to be about 1.5 miles high, about 2 kilometers. And the blur, or the tower behind it, about 7 miles, 10 kilometers or more high. I would say that this qualifies as pretty darn interesting indeed. I would like for there to be follow-up confirming evidence from other photographic sources, and maybe they exist. I'm not aware of them. Nonetheless, they're interesting. They're very interesting. And if I were running a clandestine program, I could bet you that I would be very interested in following up with covert missions to look into that. Absolutely I would. Absolutely I would. And there are these other things. Again, this is one that John Lear, again, chatted. I was talking with Richard, I think, about this the other day. I think I was talking with Richard about this. The evidence that John Lear is convinced looks like strip mining on the moon. I have to say the photograph does look something like strip mining. I wouldn't say it's going on today. I don't. If you compare it with photographs of actual strip mining operations, like, say, this one, this is a lot more involved. I think I'm not really convinced that that is a strip mining operation, but it does, have a kind of at least superficial similarity, and you could say this is worthy of a follow-up investigation. And once again, if I were gifted with such exotic technology that allowed me to go off-world, yes, I would absolutely be looking into that. I would find that to be of enough interest to justify it. And then we have the monolith on Phobos. There's a picture of Phobos, the irregular moon of Mars, one of them. Only recently discovered, as far as I know. It's fascinating to me. I mean, absolutely. I mean, look at that. That's a monolith to your top right. That thing is shaved off. It looks pretty darn squared off to me. That does not look like a natural object. Not at all. When Buzz Aldrin talked about it, you got to wonder what's inside the Buzz Aldrin's head. I'm sure all of us in this room would love to have an open, honest, quiet conversation with this man. Because he seems to be making these various statements that just are right out there. About being followed on the way to the moon. Well, that's pretty darn interesting. And then he makes a comment on this. But of course, every time he makes a statement, then he runs away from it. Edgar Mitchell, incidentally, I mentioned his statements previously about his high-level connections relating to ET bodies and technology. He also, I have to say, has really run away from those statements. And he made several of them very explicit. But now you get Edgar Mitchell to talk about this, and he's much more, he holds back. And he offers his opinion and much more nebulous statements about the reality of this all and how he He's convinced that it's real, but he doesn't talk the way he used to. He doesn't make these statements. Same with Buzz Aldrin. So the Phobos monolith, good God, that's a fascinating thing. And I would say at this point, I don't know how else to characterize that except as an evidence of artificiality. That's my own non-scientific opinion. And then, of course, we have Mars. And I am in no way going to give you an extended discourse on this, except that I would say that I also feel that what we have is you've got formations that do not look natural. Not to Mr. Hoagland, not to a lot of other scientists, and certainly not to myself. And so whether they're ancient, which I would suspect they are, or whether they're more recent, whatever, that's a secondary issue in my opinion. The bottom line is that these look darn strange, and they don't look to me like they're supposed to be there. So again, you have evidence of at least a strong motivation for us to break away civilization, to go off-world and investigate. Is it like in Kubrick's movie 2001: Space Odyssey, where you've got the monolith on the moon? Is it something that going there we would discover some great secret? Well, yeah, maybe. You wouldn't want the world to know about it, though, because, well, there goes your secrecy. The whole thing comes unglued. And again, I'll be coming back to that in a moment. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about a guy who I really think has not gotten enough attention that I feel he deserves. Jeff Challenger, he's no longer alive. He died in October 2007. I met Jeff one time. He lived in Sacramento, California. As you'll see in this news article story about him, he was paralyzed. He had a spinal injury, and so spent really his adult life lying prone, and he devoted himself to downloading NASA links of NASA missions, and also those of the European Space Agency and Russia toward the end there, and just looking at them and studying them and looking for strange things. And guess what? He found a lot of strange things. Other people have done this, but Jeff did a lot of work on it. As a personal note, I will just tell you this very odd story. It's totally true. Now, I'd been familiar with Jeff's work for some time. His website was called Project Prove. And I don't remember exactly when I became acquainted with him, around maybe 03, 04. And I was a fan right from the get-go. But in the fall of 07, I don't really know why, but I became absolutely obsessed by this man's website. I was telling everyone, you've got to look at Challenger's site. This is an amazing site. It's great. ProjectProve.com. Go there, go there, go there. I was talking about his work at various conferences. I was really talking Jeff up. And in early October 07, I was in France. I was talking to some people there about Jeff. I said, this guy has got some amazing stuff. And on a whim, I thought, I really want to do a download of his entire site. So I did a rip of his site on a super slow internet connection. It took hours. But I did it. I did the whole site. And the next day, I got an email that told me Jeff Challenger had died. And I thought, wow, what are the odds? I will go to my dying day convinced that there is something very, very unconventional happening in terms of our reality that had me focusing on that man at that time. I don't know what it was, but I was absolutely, utterly obsessed with his work. And then he died, and I had his website. And shortly after that, his website went offline, and it was gone forever. I happened to have, as far as I can tell, in the public domain, the only copy of his site, and I asked his widow permission a little while after that if I could put his site up attached to my own, and I now have it up there. So I have Jeff's website attached to keyholepublishing.com, and I would encourage you to go through it. You could spend a lot of time, months, going through it. You wouldn't be done. This is a 2-minute clip of a local news article from California about Jeff, and then I want to show you some of the anomalies that he captured and put forward.
Notice Sacramento man tonight has his eyes on the skies, looking for objects that may be out of this world.
What he's found so far will get you thinking about life on other planets. Tony Lopez in the newsroom with incredible pictures.
Yeah, they really are. You know, when we see a big bright object that lights up the night sky, chances are it's the big bright moon, right? But what if that object is moving? And what if that object can't be explained?
Almost a blur. Went under the plane and pulled out in front.
Don't call the guy with a pack of cigs and a battery crazy or lazy. A spinal injury means Jeff Challenger spends most of his time in bed. What he sees from his perch is out of this world.
Like, well, that looks good.
Jeff records and studies images from the NASA television channel. Most of it's been uneventful. Most of it.
Ran across something that just, whoa, what was that?
That was this, the bright object ripping through space.
And I ran the tape back a little bit. Watched it again, I watched it again, and I'm hollering on the hall, "Hey, honey, you gotta come see this."
The object caught on tape did not come from, say, the camcorder of a UFO enthusiast, but from NASA during the Shuttle Atlantis mission in September of 2000. Since 1999, Jeff figures he's seen at least 100 of what he calls anomalous events, a fancy way of saying UFOs. Here's another one, recorded during the recent Discovery mission, and yet another.
They're not an ice chip, they're not a piece of debris, it's not the moon, it's not a star, not another spacecraft, not a satellite.
This is what a real ice chip looks like, Jeff claims. Not nearly as bright as the unidentified object, and you can see the ice chip turn. Tonight you can hear the critics. He wants it clear, though. He just spots anomalies in space. It's not time, he says, to welcome the little green men, but he will keep looking out for anything that can't be explained.
From one mission to another, you never know what you're going to find.
So Jeff Challenger, who died October 4th, 2007. What I'd like to do is show you a couple of, oh man, I did it again. We're good, we've got it going on here. I shouldn't be allowed to touch, there we go, okay, good. So this was the clip that they just showed, and again, I'll just let you see it a little bit better on a big screen. This is from 1999, STS-96, June 3rd, and you can see in a moment this pulsing bright object going, woo, there it goes, and pulsing very regularly, and there's the ice chip. So very interesting indeed. This is a clip from the same mission, same day, over Florida. This goes for about a minute. Now, you're going to see a lot of thunderstorms in the center. This is very common. People who've never seen this before think, oh my God, there's a war going on. It's thunderstorms. They're happening all over the world. But what you want to look at are these objects on your top right, moving very oddly. And then he's got highlighted a number of other oddities in Earth orbit, and these are all, of course, looking down at Earth from the space shuttle. The guy running the, determining who sees what on the NASA TV is called the IMCO, and that person can control, if they think it gets a little too crazy, often they'll black it out like this, but then they, lighten it up. One thing Jeff pointed out is that on the NASA station, there's a tremendous amount of what seemed to be intentional interference to degrade the quality of the video. And I think he made some sense on that. There are these two objects and others. Some of them are hard to see, and the resolution here isn't quite the best. But you can see that there are things moving around that beg an explanation. And this one's almost done. I'll probably let this one go on a little longer than necessary, but I think it's just about done. Let's move on. Now this is actually quite interesting. Same mission next day. Still STS-96, 1999. What you're going to see is a very fast streaking object. It's going to go diagonally from the your top left down to the bottom right. It's very quick. You'll see it more than once. And then what you'll see is another object going in the same direction, and it will slow down toward the end. You'll see it happen. So let's take a look here. Keep your eye. There it goes, the bright fast, and that's the other one. You can see it slowing down. That's a city below. We're going to see it again. That object slowed down. Here it is again at reduced speed. Now, I don't know of any dust particle that can slow down, or any craft in space that can change direction or slow down like that. Here's something, I don't know if it's the firing of a weapon, but you're going to see two objects moving at a perpendicular way. So one's going to come straight up from below, and the other one is going to miss it, but not by much, going in a horizontal manner. This is near the city of New Orleans. So here it is, going straight up, and then the other object going across, at right angles to each other. And we'll show this at slower speed. Here it is, slower. Can you see that? You can see that a little bit. It's not the clearest, but okay. So let's move ahead. Another one, this is from 2000, STS-106. Now this is a fascinating one because you will see a definite triangular formation in motion. The sun had not risen at this point, so there's, you can't blame it on reflectivity. These objects, as you will see, are in formation, but they're not in a locked formation. They maneuver within small parameters. There is a U.S. Navy satellite called the NOS. This is a trio of satellites that orbit, but their orbit is higher, much higher than that of the space shuttle, so you wouldn't see them below. So let's take a look. You're going to see this in two different ways. So first, with the objects highlighted. And you can see also how they sort of maneuver slightly within their circle. So it's not an exact maneuvering, but they are in a formation. And now I'm going to show you, this is 50% speeded up without any highlighting, but now that you know what to look for, I bet you that you'll have an easy time seeing this, even though it's faster. Here it goes. There they are. I'll do it again for you so you can see. It's kind of in double time. So here it is again. The top one seems to be flashing a little bit more. But they're definitely in motion. There's 4 of them, but they're in a kind of a triangular pattern. What are these? Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. And here's another one. Same mission, STS-106, September 2000. This is over the city of Chicago. Now here, this is fascinating, because this is going to, you have an audio clip of the NASA commentator. And he is absolutely at a loss of how to describe that bright thing in the center. That's what you're going to be looking at. And it's actually pretty humorous. So here we go.
Atlantis is approaching sunrise as it approaches the Great Lakes area. This a view of Chicago, and also some ice crystals or other items being illuminated by the rising sun. Atlantis moving into sunrise in just about the next minute or so. As that occurs, ice crystals or water that's been dumped overboard from the shuttle is always illuminated in the close vicinity of the spacecraft. Again, that view of Chicago, though, and the shore of Lake Michigan.
Yeah, let's talk about Chicago. Isn't that awesome from this space? A couple of things. First of all, the sun had not yet risen, so they were not in sunlight. And he's trying to make it sound like, oh, yeah, well, the sun's almost about to rise. He was obviously not saying what everyone in the world who would have looked at that would have been thinking, because obviously he couldn't. He couldn't. Now, this is actually the zoom of the same object, so you can just take another look at it. Pulsing with quite interesting regularity. And it also appears to me, anyway, that the lens is still, here we go, keeping on to it. It's moving, zooming in. And that's the end of it. I have 5 minutes. Really? Uh-oh. Really? All right. I'll do my best. This is an object doing a U-turn. This is my last of the space clips. I'll show it again. Just take a look. Kind of nifty. Now here's an enhanced version of the same clip, and you can see it actually maneuvering as it goes back and forth. What is that? That's from 2005, STS, I believe, 114. So, in other words, what we have is, I think, not a bad case at all for some space anomalies. And again, as I've been saying, a very strong case for a secret space program. So what is the ultimate scenario that I'm envisioning? It's very similar, actually, to what Richard Hoagland was saying in his talk just previous. I think what we have is maybe a not-so-secret Cold War going on. It's taking place in a clandestine manner, but there's something happening. My own assessment, I haven't really told you why, and maybe at another time I will, but my assessment of it is that there are multiple groups interested in us and our world. After all, I do think that we're quite fascinating. We're on a technological trajectory that's about to place us into their world, let's face it. It's only been a century since we had a non-techno society of horses and wood. Now we're into, we're into advanced computing, probably soon AI, nanotech, and the rest. Are we being quarantined? I would say the answer is probably. That's what it seems like to me. I also think, though, that there's not just one human group with one agenda that's in this breakaway civilization that I talk about. My suspicion is that we're talking about competing groups, and they compete with each other for technology and for information. So in other words, a very rich, detailed reality that is being hidden from us. But it won't be hidden forever. Why? Because rapid change in our world is the rule, not the exception. That's the French Revolution. You realize in 1787, even 88, France was in some financial trouble, sure, but who expected that within a couple of years the king and queen would have their heads removed from their bodies, the monarchy, centuries old, would be abolished and a republic declared? No one knew that. Nobody predicted that. The Russian Revolution, ditto. At the beginning of 1917, hey, the Tsar had been on a dynasty that existed for 3 centuries. The Berlin Wall, the end of communism, all of us lived through that. Happened like lightning. People don't expect these. And we have it today. You have it in Tunisia. You have it in Egypt. You have it in Libya. You have it everywhere in the Middle East now. It's not going to go away. And the fact is that just a few months earlier, who here really would have predicted it? Change, in other words, dramatic change happens fast. Change is inevitable. This is what we looked like about 300 years ago. And we had looked more or less like this. We had lived more or less like this for quite a while. But then we got science. And now look where we're at. What's our world going to look like in another 20 years? I don't think any of us can easily predict this. What new technologies, what new capabilities will we have that will enable us as a society to crack this wide open without the help of the powers that be, without the help of these other beings? Because one thing, again, I want to hearken back to what Richard said. It's been my own opinion for quite some time. The true dynamic in the equation here isn't these other beings, and it's not the power secret keepers. It is us. We are the dynamic. And that's because we are changing so rapidly. Primarily and most observably, I would say, in our technology. But our ideas, our mind is changing. And it is happening around the world. And so we're not going to look like this even in another 20 years. Think back to 20 years ago, in 1991. Our world was totally different. So when this secret is opened up, it's going to be forced out, whether it's through a new variation of WikiLeaks of the future or through new technologies that will enable us collectively to capture, record, and communicate this in some new, unforeseen way, because I think we'd be fools to say that the world of 2011 is just going to stay like this forever. Obviously it won't. When that happens, man, it's going to be a difficult week, won't it? We're going to be asking a lot of questions. Who are they? What are they? People will not be feeling too at ease, I can guarantee you. I don't think I'll be feeling at ease, and I've been waiting for this. I think we'll all have to take several deep breaths. What do they want? What is their agenda? These are going to be front row center, obviously, for the whole world. How has this secret been kept? There's a question. It opens up a whole can of worms dealing with the power structure of our world. How has the academic community been managed? The scientific community, the political media? Where have these guys been? And what is their relationship to the global intelligence community? Clearly, that's going to be a very important question, because that's where the answer to that question lies. And then, of course, some of the things that I've been hinting at here. What's the status of our secret tech programs? Where are we at? Do we have flying saucers? Do we go off-world? That will open up the existence of this breakaway group that I've talked about. Now, skeptical scientists around the world, well, they're not just skeptical, they're openly hostile to this reality. So they're going to demand proof. I wouldn't want to be the world leader charged with breaking this news. You're going to have a lot of difficult issues to deal with. And then, what do we do? Probably the most fundamental question. What do we do about it? That's going to require leadership. It's going to require great vision and courage on the part of those people who are charged with the leadership of this planet of ours. Energy, to just open up one difficult issue. Because look, energy is one of the core issues behind the secrecy to begin with. Whatever these things used to get around, it's not petroleum. The petroleum industry, being probably the largest industry in our world, will become, poof, there it goes, for the most part. It's gone. Now, that's a great thing for us, because we all know we can't exist on petroleum forever. It's just not going to work. But in the short term, you can bet it's going to be difficult to transition, especially for those groups that have invested trillions of euros, trillions of dollars into that infrastructure. Suddenly, that infrastructure becomes much less valuable. So what is this new power source? Whatever it is, we will learn it. If it's the President of the United States, for instance, that makes this admission, how long do we really think it's going to take before the mainstream scientific community, after their initial shock and spending a week running around pulling their hair out of their heads, they come down and then they figure this out? They'll know that there are answers. They will know there are answers, and they will find those answers. And whatever it is, we're going to be using it. And how will that change our world? It's a wonderful thing, and it's kind of a difficult thing. You know, a device that can heat your home forever for cheap is wonderful, but what if it's convertible into a bomb that can blow up a country or more? It's possible. And so this is technology that we have to handle in a responsible way. Enough on that. There's so much more. And I wrote about this at some length in AD After Disclosure. Then you get geopolitical unrest. Think about the Middle East today. What's going to happen when those petroleum-producing countries suddenly will discover, hey, we don't really need your petroleum, thanks very much for the ride. The people in those nations may not be too happy with their political structure at that time. Saudi Arabia will not be able then to buy off their citizens with money like they're doing now. What about the U.S.? We saw demonstrations of 1 million people in Tahrir Square in Egypt. Don't you think there might be a march of 1 million people or more on S4, Area 51, right, Pat? Dugway Proving Ground, Los Alamos National Labs? Maybe. I'll bet you Whackin' Hut Security can stop a march of 100 people, but not 1 million. Not 1 million. And don't you think that just might happen? And then opening up a new truth movement, because once UFOs, then 9/11. JFK, underground bases, you name it, chemtrails. It's all going to be on the table. My God, what an exciting, challenging mess it's going to be. And so that, in other words, the moment of disclosure is not the end of anything. It's the beginning of the true fight for truth. Not the end. Yes? Now, any political leader, pretend you're, I don't know, Barack Obama, and it happens next week. I don't think it's going to happen next week. And I'm not too favorable about all these predictions, by the way, that say, yeah, the disclosure is going to happen, whatever. It will happen, but it won't happen until they're absolutely pressed to the wall to do it, and they'll only do it to control spin and to try to maintain control. But you see, that's where they are in danger of failing. Because think about it. Let's say you're the president of the U.S. or the president, head of the EU, whatever. You've been put into power by these elite groups. You're in there, so you're kind of working for them. But suddenly you're in a situation where you got like millions and millions of your constituents. They're ticked. They're angry. And you're going to have to make a choice. Who do you side with? The public or those Illuminati, these secret keepers, whoever these people are that put you into power, the elites. And it's not necessarily a given that a leader will side with those elites. He may, but he may not. He may not. One of my purposes in writing this last book is to show that it is possible for a responsible leader with a grand vision and a positive vision of our world to make the right choice. And the right choice is to side with the people to do it. Can it happen? Yes, of course it can happen. Will it happen? I don't know. But it can happen. And I am just about in conclusion, so the timing hasn't been too bad. I would leave you, though, with the fact that whatever the end result of this is, let's not please be utopians here. I personally am an idealist, but I'm not a utopian. There are certain things that I believe very strongly in. I have this crazy idea in the idea of truth. I believe in it. And truth is a real difficult friend to have. It requires a lot from you, but it's worth it. If you're sleeping in your home and your house is on fire, but you're having this great dream of sipping margaritas on the beach and someone's giving you a foot massage, well, that's a great dream, but it's a dream. Would you rather wake up, deal with the fire? Well, ultimately, we have to wake up. We have to deal with this fire. Keep in mind, our species has always dealt with catastrophe. It has always dealt with problems. People die, new people are born, and we adapt. It's really not going to be any different. We're going to have to deal with this very, very difficult situation. It's like a parent who has their first child. Who is ever ready for their first child? Nobody is ever ready for their first child, but you just have it. And then you deal with it. And we as a species, as a society, are going to have to deal with this. The ultimate irony of a disclosure of this is that even after 20 years or more, it's quite possible that we may not be an awful lot further along in understanding what we're dealing with. We may have a sufficient amount of knowledge to know that there's something going on. But that may be a very different thing from being able to pull all of the documents out of the classified world, being able to get these other entities, whatever they are, to interact with us in something more than the aloof fashion that they've done. So that, in other words, it's going to require work. Disclosure is never the end. It's always going to be the beginning. It's also possible, and I think it's likely, that these secret keepers, and far be it from me to defend these people, but they are very possibly scrambling themselves to try to deal with this challenge. I could very easily see it as a situation where they're so far ahead of us, this breakaway civilization, they might look at us and think, how can these people ever adapt? How can they ever deal with the awesome reality that we know? Well, I think that we can deal with it. If they can, so can we. It's all about growing up. You can't be a child forever. And we all love being children. And no one really likes to have to take on those responsibilities of adulthood. That's what adolescence is all about. But we get through it. And I do believe we will go through it in this case. So that's really it. I'd like to thank you for your time. These are my websites. Thank you very much.